Hi, everyone. Welcome to World of Women podcast through Zita's Healthy Beginnings. Today is October 18th, and I am really glad that we all are here to talk about tonight's topic, which was a continuation of what we discussed last week. I mentioned last week that this month is October, is the month of awareness month for breast cancer. And we did talk about, what that was all about. And I think to some extent, and we had a survivor who showed up and shared with us her own experience. And today we continue to talk about this important issue that has really done a lot of harm to women and few men. A disease that is curable, thank God, but also it takes a lot, and it can also be prevented in so many ways and be detected early, as science has proven that early detection of breast cancer or even ovarian cancer goes a long way to help in treatment intervention. And that is what I'm here today to talk about. Now, we know that breast cancer sign people use to remember that month is pink. And if you look at my head, you can see that I have on my head a pink color. And what that symbolizes is really the beauty women carry in their whole life, as they also bring life. They are the beauty of the world. And when they suffer, the whole world suffers. And this deadly and disease we're talking about, which is breast cancer, is the one disease that is very debilitating. And if not really discovered on time, might really impose a lot of challenges, both for the patient and for the healthcare providers. And we try to talk about it, raise awareness all the time, but particularly in the month of October is when that critical awareness is mainly encouraged. I know some people may not really understand or don't really have the time to take a moment to reflect on what it means to be a patient with breast cancer. But when people who are opportune to go to the hospitals, or those who have opportunity to really connect with individuals with breast cancer, they can testify that it's one of the diseases you don't even want to wish for your worst enemy. Because both the treatment modalities and even the side effects of some of the medications can really wreak havoc on the life of a woman or a man that has breast cancer. And when a woman suffers from breast cancer or a man suffers from breast cancer, the whole family suffers. So we're not just talking about this woman has cancer or breast cancer, but we are also worried about the family. We're concerned about what happens in her family, immediate family, in her community, what happens at her job. These days, when women, any woman is being diagnosed who is pretty much in the workforce, let me take, for example, nurses. A few nurses, since I started my career, have been diagnosed with breast cancer. And most of them, sad to say, had stage 3. And these are healthcare providers. And once a patient somebody has that, they automatically have to leave their job. So when a woman leaves her job, a man leaves his job due to an illness like that, what does that do to their families? We know that women these days, 70% of women in the United States run single home families. They are the ones raising their kids. So the question is, if a mother who runs a family, single mom who runs a family, gets diagnosed, as I know few families that have been diagnosed with breast cancer, what happens to the rest of the family? How are they being sustained? Who takes care of them? And even when the woman is going through that treatment, what happens to her as a person? The psychological impact of that whole treatment, the spiritual impact of that whole treatment, not to talk about the physical impact. I shared last week how women, once they start taking care of going through the chemo, the first thing that goes is their hair. And we know hair is the beauty of a woman. And so when stuff like this happen, we're not just talking about just the woman or just the family. It becomes a community involvement, community concern, in fact, global community. As we know now, the risk of cancer, breast cancer in women, is increasing by the day. Granted that we now have some treatments that are innovative treatments that are really helping to improve the health of women and men, some men in this with this kind of diagnosis, but it still has its own impact. The mortality rate has really reduced a little bit, but the question still remains: how do we collectively eliminate or reduce the risk of breast cancer in women? Last week, I also mentioned about some of the preventive measures that we could do. One of them is reducing the stress level, paying attention to what we eat, paying attention to our environment. Also, some of the drugs that people take. But one of the natural, most important thing that we have evidence shows that is really helping to reduce breast cancer, especially in the Black community and women, is for them to breastfeed their babies. Also, science have proven that the breast cancer that they have found in the Black population is more aggressive. Nobody knows the reason, but this is what they found. And therefore, it becomes, for me, it is critical that we pay attention to this situation and find ways to collectively raise even more awareness for our community and see how we can help them understand, ask questions, take preventive measures. And one of the preventive measures that we take or encourage people to take is doing their mammogram. We know some people now do mammogram twice in a year, especially if they are aware of family or hereditary. But also, there are some people who are developing this breast cancer with no family history at all. And that causes a whole lot of concern. We are wondering, so how are people getting this if no member of their family had breast cancer? And the answer is, when you think of the environmental issues that we are all battling, all the chemicals in our body care products, hair care products, nail care products, you find out that some of the cancers, carcinogenous elements are all contained in most of these products. And when people say, oh yeah, look at the level, it's very small. And I'm like, let me tell you, when you get a little bit here and a little bit there, which all of us are exposed to, it adds up. Let us just be aware of that little by little everywhere. You catch it from your food, the food you eat, from the air you breathe, from the environment, from your own house, from everywhere. Your work, some of the chemicals that are being used at work, we are all exposed. Some people are more exposed than others. And it depends also on the kind of work you do. For healthcare providers, we are constantly exposed to dealing with people's stress. If you're a healthcare provider, you're constantly exposed to dealing with people's health. And the healthcare system in the United States right now is really concerning. So a healthcare provider is always worried about how can my patient get better? And remember, that person also has their own individual problems. They might even have a family member dealing with that cancer or dealing with any other chronic situation. So this whole thing adds up. The exposure adds up. The susceptibility adds up. And you find out before you know it, people are too stressed. They start developing their own health issues. And all of that will add up and really contribute to people being susceptible to this kind. And so when people are talking about, oh yeah, this doesn't run in their family, how did he or she get it? So just think about what I'm just sharing right now, especially the stress level and the kind of food we eat and the kind of environment we're all exposed to. So what I'm trying to explain is very critical. It's something that you can also get more information about, whether from your doctor or from other healthcare providers, or even in the internet. When people go on the online, you get all kinds of information, but just be careful. Whatever information you get regarding breast cancer, ovarian cancer, any kind of cancer, please try to double check with your healthcare provider to really rule out all the other wrong information so that you can be guided on how to really prevent it, reduce the exposure, and how you can actually support someone dealing with breast cancer. I know some communities have kind of planned or have groups, breast cancer survival groups. They're here in the United States, they're elsewhere in the world too. So we encourage people to get into, get into these groups for support. Group support is very important to helping with either breast cancer, ovarian cancer, or any kind of chronic disease like diabetes. So we know that communally, people can bring ideas together, share ideas that is beneficial to individuals and groups of people and families. I also want to bring an important point that is also a concern when we talk about breast cancer. Here in the United States, we are all really opportune and fortunate to get access to health care for the most part, to kind of keep our regular annual check, or visit our doctors on a regular basis to dictate some of these things and for our overall health. There are some places in the world where women have no access to healthcare, regular healthcare, not to talk about some of these preventive and primary care measures we're talking about. So my concern is, how do we reach out to groups like this, to women who are struggling? And most of them, by the time they're being diagnosed with breast cancer, is stage 4. I have seen women go through that, and few of them made it because it was really at the climax of that whole disease that they were diagnosed, and they had little or no hope. Purchasing or even going through the treatment, they could not afford it. And what happened? They were not able to make it. So the question is, how do we even reach out to people like this? How do we share this information? How do we support them? How do we encourage them to take care of themselves and take care of their families? When a woman is struggling with or going through even the treatment with breast cancer, what happens to her little ones? A lot of kids have been left not really taken care of as they should, because their mothers were not in the best form of health to take care of them due to their own illness. So trying to prevent this problem, trying to provide support, the needed support, is very critical. Because once a woman is in her best form, best health, she has the capacity to take care of her family, take care of her community, take care of the world in her own way. And if she is not in that good health to do that, it trickles down, the impact trickles down to the family, to the community, and to the world altogether. So today I am leaving this message and asking people to please continue to raise that awareness of the need for people to pay attention, especially women, to pay attention to their health, to take priority. Because if you cannot really take care of yourself, you're not going to take care of anybody. And realize that once you are sick, it's not only you that suffers, a whole lot of us suffer. And that's why this is really very important to me and to all women, hopefully, that we pass on this information, share it among our circles, make sure that everybody understands what this need is. In this month of October, we have about 12 more days or 13 more days to go in the month. And we can really use this 13 days creatively in any way or shape that we affirm we can, to spread the news and let people be mindful, help them to get more information on breast cancer and how to take care of themselves, how to take care of their families. So I am actually going to open it up to the audience. If anyone has any contributions towards this crucial topic, please feel free to make your contributions. Or if you have any questions, we're here to tackle some of those questions for you.
So Zita, I would say, wow, that was quite a run through of, I didn't really keep track of the bullet points and the different components of, where the awareness fits in and all the different elements of it. But it seems like it's something more than a dozen, different things. And I can even think of, you basically spoke to it, but I can re-wordsmith it in different ways, that I see it as an intergenerational concern and such like that. So I guess in my life story, you know, I mean, yeah, I can reach this story specifically of breast cancer, but I guess for the point I want to make, in terms of like my mother didn't have breast cancer. She had pancreatic cancer. And, that was a little bit of a story of in the house I grew up in, we stayed there until I graduated high school. And then as soon as the graduation stuff was going on and so forth, and we got that all in with the high school I was at, my mother already had her diagnosis and already starting her fight against pancreatic cancer. But the irony in that story was that my parents decided to relocate as soon as I was done with high school. And a little bit of my mother's aspiration was to move closer to my grandmother, her mother, so that she could take care of her mom. And what ended up happening is that, they bought the plot and they planned the building and they got everything in motion. And it wasn't too long after they made the commitment to move a couple doors down from my grandmother that my mother got her diagnosis. So it was like a role reversal, the whole inspiration to take care of mom, but it became mom again, taking care of my mother, her daughter. And so life takes these, twists and turns and surprises us and reminds us that there's things in the universe and the world that, we end up not having control over, and our story can change overnight. And you describe a lot of what I would say in some sense reactive, but yet it's kind of in this mantra of just go with what you got. As soon as you have new information about your health, like, there's potential risk there, like in terms of a screening or a self-examination or whatever, obviously part of the advocacy is all the things you can do when this comes into your newfound health history, which then becomes in the insurance world and so forth, pre-existing condition for you now. But I like a lot of the other stuff you presented because it really keeps it in balance. That even though a lot of that stuff is, marketed and positioned as prevention, like say a self-exam or in all the screenings, obviously when something's detected, things from your health history have already progressed to the point that this stuff is showing itself. So like when you say diet, it's always coupled diet and exercise, because the idea is flow. So, in our capillaries, or sometimes it's described as microvessels, how well our cells, and our tissues can receive nutrients, receive the oxygen, get perfusion, they call it. So basically, as you breathe in, and that oxygen goes into your pulmonary vessels and then becomes available to your full body system, your body's ability to deliver that at the cellular level is key and crucial. See, and what happens is that when within our body, there are cells in the tissues which are not getting this delivery, then it becomes susceptible and vulnerable to say cancer cells. So that this is the whole issue. So a lot of things play into that. You described a whole set of things, and yeah, definitely, like you say, environment in terms of like say, our mobile devices. When I was at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the engineering school, we took, I guess what I'll call, I don't remember what they really called it, but I'll call it a general engineering class. And one of the things they talked about is a little bit of where when you're going in engineering, you can enter into some of these social responsibility things, as I'll call it now. And I don't know how the professor delivered it. I don't remember that closely. But one thing he said was, like, in the discipline of electrical and computer engineering, you got this circuitry and you're using like now 5G and, all this stuff. You're putting all this stuff into the electromagnetic fields, which you learn about as an electrical and computer engineer because you're contributing to that. And now this was back in the 90s, folks. I was at UW-Madison 1990 to 1994. And, so back then they already had a professor able to present to college students, University of Wisconsin-Madison, to say, these are things that are entering into the career that you're prospectively going into, getting a degree in this, going out there and doing this
I'm losing you there.
What's that? I'm sorry, what did you say, Zita?
I said we were losing you there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for the pause, because hopefully I'm back now. But again, now at this point in life, the decades later now, I keep hearing about that. And now being in disability advocacy with the Americans with Disabilities Act, there's actually protection for those that have sensitivity to EMS. Now, the idea is really 100% of us have sensitivity to electromagnetic fields and this radiation from the cellular towers. All of us have that sensitivity, but, I guess for, darn near all of us have the capacities within our systems to run through that process of purging it, at least to some level, where it doesn't give us symptoms and it doesn't, in our healthcare experience, show signs. So it goes hidden, the effects that it really has on us. But there's no doubt that these things that we do with technology have ongoing effects, because energy is everything. So basically, if you really get into it, quantum physics, which is kind of like, okay, now forget about that I just said quantum physics, but as soon as you say that term, it's an intimidating term, because it's getting down into such granular detail, and it's getting down into theories and stuff that 99.9% of us, we don't care to dive into that. But the point is that, energy does matter. So like when they say, laughter yoga, and stuff like this, and we create these energies through our emotions and the power of a smile and stuff like that, and you start to feel a different energy inside. These things matter because, it's what we do to refresh ourselves, to rejuvenate ourselves, and, things like water source. So when you talk about some demographics, they say zip code matters. So what kind of water are we, making available in an area? Water source is huge because, a biological fact that doesn't get talked about very much is that, the body chemistry matters. So when you talk about alkaline versus basic, alkaline, that pH level. See, now that matters. See, and now you're talking about ions. So now we're back to energy, but it comes from the body chemistry. So the alkaline level of water matters. The food we eat, the fruits, and, if there's pesticides in there, that acidity matters. Because if we keep pumping all this acidity in us, our body starts to become a screening system, a filtering system. And that's not really the wisest thing, to put our body has some capacity for that, but it shouldn't be challenged by eating the oily, greasy foods and all the desserts and all this stuff. What we put in, I have fun saying it, in our pie hole what we put in there matters, and what we breathe in here matters. The air, like you said, environment, all this stuff matters. So the idea is that when we get to a point of a self-examination or a screening that gives us the detection of a lump and such like this, a cyst, and all these things that we have to check out and get a biopsy, when things get to that point, we've already had this abuse of our cells and our tissue to a point where now it's built up that particular node in our body with whatever cell and tissue that represents it, however it amassed and has grown to. So that becomes the irony of our treatments, because when we go and we do chemotherapy, the idea is that the cancerous cells have become so strong that we are forced with the decision. It's kind of like war, like out there in the world, war. You go out at war and unfortunately there's collateral damage. And that's what's happening with these therapies, is that you're like, there's going to be some collateral damage. We're going to be killing off a lot of cells, and not to talk against it. I don't want that to be the message, because, when you get to these points, you got a decision, because it's like war. It's like, that's why they call it a fight, the good fight, because you're starting to make a decision of how do you want to fight this, that there's cancerous cells going to work, doing what they're doing, and the doctor's giving you some options. So you do want to consider all their options and understand them and make that decision that only you can make, and maybe reach to your immediate family and whatever, all those impacted. And somehow, however you make decisions in life, you make that decision. So it's definitely not going to be for me how you're going to make that decision. But this is what I'm adding to the conversation, is that it's an all hands on deck fight. And that's why we have these awareness months. So the other part of that is because of human nature, we have a challenge to maintain our attention. So the strategies these charities and nonprofits take is to condense it into a month, because with social media and so forth, there might be enough viral activity that it might get some propulsion and get out there and reach more people by condensing it in a month. But the need doesn't go away for the other 11 months. It's just we have our communication limitations, and these sponges between our ears, are limited. If we really could maintain constant attention, that's the thing we should do. So the idea is that if we have things that we're learning or things of relevance, in November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, we should be putting that out there, because this should be the month that teaches us the action we need to take, and we take those opportunities as they provide themselves, and they have these conversations with families. So grandmothers should not be afraid to talk to grandchildren. Grandchildren should not be afraid to talk to their parents, and parents should be looking at, how are we doing in the family nucleus to make sure that our loved ones and our family members all understand these elements, because we get so busy and we have all this stress, and we kind of make this decision like you just hope everybody's okay, and it's kind of not me. But the idea and the feel of it, like in these survivor groups, it's not that these people sit there like, oh, I knew it was coming, I had the cancer markers, and I really didn't take good care of myself, and all this. No, there might be an individual or people, and not that that's an issue, but the idea is that, again, I guess my bottom line point is it's an all hands on deck effort. We got to be able to figure out how we're entering into our faith communities with this idea to take care of all of our faith community members. When we talk about our service groups, if we're saying some people are our friends, where are the opportunities that we're looking out? Because if we don't get these constant nudges, a lot of us will just, again, and then you talk about affording, right in my family. My wife has a job at a university, and she's got a health savings account, and we've got our own challenges to figure out how we're going to pay for everything we're doing, living beyond our means. And then some of these things really do get kicked down the road. And it's just kind of like, wow, what are we doing? But when we're worried about catching up to paying this and paying that, paying this, we're not thinking about how can we spend more money and go to that clinic and get the screening, even though that's what we should be doing. There's all these distractions that it's like, wow, it's been 3 years since I've been in there for that examination. So that's where friends and community and, environmental exposure of the message, to have posters and so forth reminding us. Because in marketing, I choose to say, from the thank you economy and nonprofits, so like Zita's bringing us Zita's Healthy Beginnings. Zita's Healthy Beginnings should be thanking every individual that makes the work of that nonprofit work 7 times throughout the year. So in 2023, Zita should be looking at how can everybody be thanked 7 times in different ways. Maybe it's a group broadcast, like, hey, we're thanking everybody. But that's kind of a little concept, the thank you economy. And I treat marketing the same way. We have to ask ourselves, how are we getting their attention? How are we getting their interest? How are they going to be desiring to do what Zita was just all talking about? And then to take action. That's 4 steps they have to get through. So I use the power of 7 again, and to say, if we're really going to lead an individual to what we're talking about, we should be thinking about how are they being introduced and reminded 7 times over, because that's where we might and hopefully have predictable success, that they're going to have that highly informed decision. And then when people are highly informed, it's all we can do. And then it's up to them. But I pose, if we don't have 7 ways, which our families and our communities, our educational system, our government, our civic activities, in our job sites, do we have this in our job sites to say, hey, we want to take care of our team? We don't want to be hearing like, Phyllis has, breast cancer, or if that's the case, but there's some things like she didn't do a self-examination. This thing went way further than it did, or she didn't get a screening and it went way further, and she's in this advanced stage where maybe that could have been prevented. And that's where this stuff is prevention, and all the fun things we do as athletes. And there's so many opportunities that we don't take. And that's what this awareness is all about, is what's it going to take, myself included. These conversations are good for me. As much as I can get on my soapbox and talk to it, I'm avoiding it as much as the other person. And so this is where we're all in it together. And that's what it's about. Does that sound about right, Zita?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. You really articulated it very, very well for us. And when you mentioned about screening needs, I know some women who cannot actually, some of them don't have health insurance, not to talk of, doing what we're talking about, doing your annual check. So, but I do know that if anybody is looking to, to do breast screening, and they don't have access to, health insurance, they can reach out to me. We have some organizations now that are really offering women, free breast screening, mammogram. So, and I'm glad that we have people dedicated to helping other women to get themselves checked, to be in good health. So if you know anyone who is wanting to, do their screening, but they can't afford it, we have some organizations out there who are willing to help, to in different states. I think they're in different states, and they're really interested in knowing some group of women who are in need. And so please, as we share this information, we want the whole goal is to get as many women as possible to get their regular checks every day, to do their self-exams, to pay attention to their health, especially the environment, as we have already shared. to the food you eat, to how you really live on a daily basis, and find ways to stay healthy for yourself, for your family, and for the community. We all care and we want to continue to care for one another. And this is one of the ways that Zeta's Healthy Beginnings is engaging in this, spreading the word to make sure people get healthy and stay happy. So, anyone else want to add something or has any questions before we round up?
Well, thank you, Zeta and Karen. This is a very important topic for everybody to know about and to support everybody.
So I have a question.
That's kind of what I have to say for the moment.
Well, Emily, I'm going to ask you to say a little more. I'm going to ask you a question for the timeliness of this. Ladies and gentlemen, Emily is a proud participant in a planning committee, a volunteer. She helps the Autism Society of South Central Wisconsin, which has an absolutely marvelous conference coming up called the Integral Conference. And I know because Emily helped me attend it 2 years in a row, even though I had other things going on throughout the day, and I probably will this year too, but I kind of tune in passively, and then I'm more plugged into their social time after the time of the scheduled event, which is absolutely amazing. And this group is hardcore because they're not afraid to take something that I'm thinking would be like an hour social after a day of a conference. No, they go at least a few hours, and they just keep going and going. I mean, this is an annual event that a lot of people look forward to, and they hyper consume it on that Saturday it takes place. But the reason I bring this up is you have the Autism Society of South Central Wisconsin having a major event. And Emily, with what we're talking about tonight, does the Autism Society bring this in to, help the community of people with autism to stay on top of these things and the particular nuances being a person with autism? Does that happen? I'm guessing not, but I'm just asking if maybe I can learn something that they are doing something that I'm not aware of.
I'm not aware of anything like specifically on like breast cancer awareness or anything like that. I know they have a number of different programs, but I'm not aware of anything like specifically. I can't talk today. Specifically, I don't think like specifically anything we were like talking about tonight, but maybe it's just something I could maybe bring up or anything like that to so for more discussion or having anything about it.
Yeah, because it's an interesting dynamic of systems and bureaucracy and Medicare, Medicaid, such like this, where, the medical procedures have to be approved, and, some members that receive these benefits have maybe caregivers and so forth. And then you always, with medical appointments, it can be quite a process to, if somebody's not a driver and going so you become reliant on many other people to do their part. And and I think that's another thing where being in the disability community, it becomes an added layer to the whole dynamic that I sure never appreciated until I dove into it a little bit 15 years ago, but more so starting a decade ago. And I actually served as vice chair of the Wisconsin Council on Physical Disabilities, but I got some insight through the Governor's Committee for People with Disabilities. And, it is quite amazing. A lot of the things we take for granted, maybe being outside of the disability community, that when you look at that, little bubble of people that are Americans with disabilities or people around the world, talk about 2 billion people around the world, and then you add something like this, there's some logistical realities and some connections. I mean, there's a pathway to go from I want to take care of myself to I'm reliant on a doctor and I need this equipment to go do the screening. I need all this stuff to come together. You know, there's this life reality that, you know, you set out to do some planning and plans can fail. So you can get some discouragement. Like it's a whole lot of work. It's like, wow, to just do a simple thing. So it's something to think about, to be appreciative, you know, of when you can just hop in a car and make your own arrangements and you're not relying on a care team and stuff like that for all these things to come into place. You know, that can affect some of the numbers because we might have some people who have other factors that I might say are rigged against them, unfortunately.
Thank you all. Thank you, Kat and Emily, for the wonderful contribution to this topic. This podcast, as we know, is brought to us by the World of Abilities and in collaboration with Transform You Network and Park. We are always glad for the opportunity to use this platform to reach our audience. And we are very glad that we are all contributing to growing this podcast. And let us keep this information that we're sharing lively by sharing it with other people in our groups, in our homes, in our circle, to make sure that this information gets to pretty much every single person, especially women, and get them to really respond by taking responsibility for their own life. And we always like women to be at the forefront because we know what they represent, both in the family and in the society. And therefore, anything and everything that concerns them is really important and critical and priority to the world. Because when you have a caring, healthy mother, you have a healthy nation, you have a healthy family. So thank you all for your contributions. And I hope that we'll come back next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, to continue this conversation and also listen to one of our presenters who would be also talking about health and the challenges and how to stay healthy. So thank you all and have a blessed week.
Sorry, folks. I have been going away here and I had my microphone muted. I apologize. We are getting going here for the World of Ability podcast. I'm Kurt Roskoff, founder, creator, producer, marketer, doing every hat I need to make this work here at the World of Ability podcast. And I'm joined here in the Zoom studio with Emily Gulmer, our technician, helping us manage the beginning and the end of the show, and potentially with our panelists to see if Marianne of Waikiki, Mariana de Mexico with her travels, and we have Barbara Weinstein, who tends to come in here on our Saturdays. So we're just going to kick this in gear, and I know I have a lot to cover and a lot to provide. And so if this is a solo flight, I think I've got it covered. Emily is reporting here. She sent text messages, Facebook messages, LinkedIn messages for our couple panelists, Barbara and Marianne. So if it is something that works out for them, they will join us if they can. Otherwise, if not, they're welcome, and no commitment here on their part. So we just welcome them in because they seem to have fun with it. So basically, the World of Ability podcast is formed to be disability advocacy podcasting live stream. So this is intended for everyone. And the crux of where we find it important that it's for everyone is, where are we going if our messages in disability friendly language, in terms of disability etiquette, in terms of global public inclusive infrastructure, in terms of universal design, Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, where are we at if the 75% of people who don't as much identify themselves as being in the disability community, if everybody just takes a pass and just says, no, I'm good. I wish people with disabilities well, people with disabilities are welcome to my thing, and just kind of, if we all take a passive approach, it brings everything to a standstill. And I know this from experience because I report in my story that, with first 20 years of life, first 30 years of life, and in some trend into first 40 years of life, and here I'm at my first 50 years of life, I've had to, make a decision to look at how it benefits me to be more assertive, to, take a commitment in being better, to up my skills in mastering these things from the community of people that I tout as the masters of ability. So what I mean by masters of ability, if we think of the community of the disability community and the people who I lean on personally to help me get the conversation started, are people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, people with deafness, people with blindness, people with physical disabilities, people living with chronic pain, those that have a goal of substance use reduction, everyone out there in the mental health community. And we go on and on. I'm repetitive as well with the Americans with Disabilities Act that, most people in America, and then can carry over to other places in the world, to look at understanding of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I know in the last handful of years when I learned that the Americans with Disabilities Act also protects people with chemical sensitivity. There are those out there with also multiple chemical sensitivity. And you got the, with independent living centers and with a lot of federal programs, they ask to not wear fragrances, to refrain from your colognes and your perfumes with their programs, because they don't want to create a barrier that somebody doesn't come to their event or activity or come into their office space to be served only for the fact that, they have maybe an intense reaction or enough of a reaction that it would just dissuade them from coming into the space because somebody else is wearing a perfume or a cologne that just makes it unpleasant, and they just decide not to. So that situation is protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we also have, in our age of technology, with 5G and, all this stuff that, all this radiation we put out there, the electromagnetic fields, there's EMF sensitivity. And with all of our smart homes and, all this automation where, all those signals are traversing maybe a home, because everything, whether it's the thermostat and, garage doors and maybe even blinds in homes are controlled, or TV sets, all these things are going electronic and using the Bluetooth technology and infrared and, security systems, not to say to not do these things, but, to be ready, because, there are people that have an advocacy themselves, and maybe they act on it, maybe they don't, but it's a biological reality for them that if they enter into these spaces with that type of an intensity of electromagnetic fields, they physically shut down, or it's enough of an unfavorable response that they just get out of that space. So it's just like anything, like if places are too cold, too hot, and if you don't have the adjustment, clothing wise or things to cool you off, you seek other places. Like if it's heat index outside, you go into where there's air conditioning. So it's just human nature to look at that surroundings, which favors that which you are trying to do. So I want to go through the baseline of what we all have here at the World of Ability podcast show. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being our fans out there. And we are featuring Community Hope Farm for Zita's Healthy Beginnings. Zita is a midwife, and she is in this program which helps train doulas, and it's all about healthy babies, birthing, and supporting mothers, and that support and resources for families. And so it's just really a strong attraction that's a fundamental aspect of life. And so we're hopping on that bandwagon and showing our support. Zita is going strong with the help of Emily here, and producing every Tuesday, 8:30. I'm sorry, that's a different show. 8 o'clock Eastern. So 8 o'clock sharp Eastern. And I say sharp, but in reality, Zita gets her YouTube going at 8:05 Eastern. But for the Zoom activity, they aim to get everybody gathered at 8 o'clock, and then at 8:05, go ahead and put it out YouTube live every Tuesday. World of Women podcast, the WOW podcast. So we met Zita through the Happy Neighborhood Project. So the Disability Channel is a proud member of the Disability Channel, showcasing abilities. And, we found the Happy Neighborhood Project August 2020. And I've been plunging in there as ambassador of the Disability Channel, and, had a good first few months of participation there. I offered to be a co-host. I noticed that HMP Wisconsin, with HMP was not any establishment. So I offered up, took me a go around of a few times and so forth, the follow up. But, we got it connected, and Edwin Edeberry, the Chief Happiness Officer, recognized my ambition to get Wisconsin going in their network as they were opening up in different states. This is something that's grown. That is 5 countries. We have Canada, We have India, we have Europe, we have Australia, so we got, 5 countries this is in. And it's something that started in Sacramento, California. So one city had the Happy Neighborhood Project going into the pandemic, and really strong, obviously, then with all that focus in Sacramento, with in-person networking, and with the Chief Happiness Officer, Edwin Edaberry, being passionate about spreading happiness around the world. You can check out his story on YouTube. On YouTube, there is a tremendous TEDx talk out of UNLV, and it is happiness as a default position. So if you do that YouTube search, happiness as a default position, you'll see that video presentation, TEDx talk by Edwin Edaberry, Chief Happiness Officer. And, this story of interviewing 1,000 people about happiness. And one of the 1,000, a very compelling follow-up, that one of the 1,000, because of in the interview being very persistent, like methodically persistent and relentless, like in the handshake, just not giving up Edwin's hand, that he was not gonna leave without knowing the name of the man interviewed. And that was the signature experiences. Edwin just left it that they departed as strangers, but it's just one stranger saying, can you commit to me 24 hours of happiness, and commit to themselves 24 hours of happiness. And then at the end of that 24 hours to commit to do it again. And so he left 1,000 people with that adage. And the one follow-up being that sharing after the fact of the conversation over a telephone call that he was experiencing suicide ideation, and had a psychiatrist involved, psychologist, getting attention to it, going into that clinical space. And it just wasn't seeming to, do the trick, but that experience with Edwin was full of such appreciation and gratefulness that, the gentleman, shared that Edwin made a difference, in that experience. So as you're listening to all this, everybody can come up with their own interpretation of exactly what Edwin shared there. But my interpretation personally was, as far as I'm concerned, Edwin basically saved that man's life, So this is important work here, folks. And, with the Happy Neighborhood Project, we put into practice things like laughter yoga and so forth. And we have great appreciation for Maury Zelovich, who is out there from out of Canada, and he's networked with us through H&P Canada, but then through many of our meetings with the Happy Neighborhood Project. And he is a brainwave engineer. He talks about how he, developed his whole wheelhouse of what he does in the need for himself. And so he's had success with it, that he made a practice of it because he is one of these people that experience suicide ideation. And, with, going through these moments in time, which, the behavior is, in the act of, in carrying out, going the direction of suicide. And fortunately for Maury, that didn't happen. And, so he gives a lot of credit to his faith and such like this, but really finding a real biological need again. And this is, something, talking about it right now, it's very timely in what we're doing with our shows. Ability MKE Now radio show through River West Radio, riverwestradio.com, out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We hop on here again with Emily, and we are on Zoom with River West Radio, and we have our talk show, 29 minutes of airtime with River West Radio out of Milwaukee, 104.1 FM right there in Milwaukee, the immediate area to the antenna of this low power signal. It's community radio, so it's very informative, informational, and just a matter of fact. It takes the sensationalism away from the commercialism. And so the whole premise, regulated by the FCC is, there's no reference to pricing, no call to action. So it's not, buy this television set for the low price at $299 or, any of that stuff. That's all not allowed with this community radio. It operates right in with the constructs of nonprofit work. So that's where it's not a commercial radio station. It's a nonprofit radio station. Community radio, and getting a license that way to, serve the neighborhoods in close proximity to where the antenna is up. And so it went up as River West Radio because it's a River West community area within Milwaukee, neighborhoods identifying with that River West location within Milwaukee. And there's a River West co-op and, a lot of great stuff there right in the River West neighborhood. So great community opportunity, and, in production of podcasting, it's a great experience because we're on here on Zoom on those Wednesdays, putting it out on Facebook Live. My wife Sue puts it out there, and then again, we have Emily helping with all that to make sure we're getting the recording and so forth. So as with this show, we just got to watch our microphones a couple minutes into the show before I realized I was talking away with the muted mic. So interesting experience, and just goes towards, being able to do public speaking and presenting and just having something genuine, authentic, and, something that is just from the heart, and maybe a lot of shooting from the hips and spontaneous, and, but valuable, because I think that, those of you out there are listening for something like, why am I listening to this? And if it's just, a candy coated element, I think it's something to just tune out. If it gets to be superficial and just sensationalized, go over the top, and it just doesn't seem real. So I guess it's a little bit of saying that's what we try to do here. We try to keep it real, and it's very important stuff when we're talking about inclusion, accessibility, accommodations. And, I talk about how in a year's worth of programming, we're over a couple of years into it. And so I think if you go back, to 2020, and get a sampling, and then you go through 2021, and, we're 10 months into 2022 here, I think you'll see that we're branching topics from, faith life, service life, lifelong learning, civic, governmental agency work. We're talking about business, employment, that economic sector. And we're also talking about all the fun things, entertainment, things like this, where, it's something as, fueling your time and enriching yourself and getting these insights where maybe we're sharing something that you never thought of before. So what we present in this area is entertainment, hobbies, pastime, leisure activities, travel, sports, rec, all this stuff that is just kind of, when you're not working, what are the things you like to do, your pastimes and all that. So, so it gets us to the extent that no matter what you're doing in life, whether you're getting married, whether you're getting divorced, whether you're having a child, whether you're going to a funeral, whether you're, in an accident because you're out there doing something, whether you're, doing community service, volunteerism, whatever we're doing in life, to really ask ourselves, what exactly are we doing? Like that's a self conversation, a self check-in. What am I doing to make my life more available for people with disabilities? And then if we're a person with a disability, to say, what am I doing to, be a leader, to be, someone who leads the way, to do something that favors those who don't have a disability, to be more involved with my community, with my peers, to understand the disability community greater, and to look for those natural ways that can happen. Because I guess the nuance here is that it can sound like we're getting on our soapbox and we're getting preachy, and we're getting on our pulpit, and we're going out there and like telling others what to do. And I think that it's pretty universal that I believe that we all more want to be validated. We all want to be legitimized. We all want to find that what we're doing is truth and to be rewarding. And so we search for that in life, where we can get some agreement that we're okay. And when we are in a place in life where we're being told we're not okay, that's not fun, and sometimes we can be in that place where we appreciate that. And it is where we might be giving thanks that, what, maybe we do need to make an adjustment. Maybe somebody's done us a favor by helping us see something that we maybe are a little tuning out as we go through our day to day. So that's the interesting opportunity that we have here through the world of ability, because I call it mitigating circumstances. Like with orthopedic surgeons, they call that reduction. When you have a break of a bone or something, and then you're looking at what they're doing and you look at how they write it up, they call that a reduction. And that's what they provide for you, reduction of that split, that fracture. They bring it together. So that's what I'm trying to do at the community level, and between people. I'm trying to see what we can do to bring this together so that in these little organic settings, like I know in my local area, there's our local fire department is celebrating 100 years. And so they just are wrapping up now with this celebration where they had an open house and they had all the family friendly activities and all the things provided by the fire department to celebrate their 100 years. So then the question becomes, for that service area of the fire department, how many of the residents of the area with disabilities were at the event? And if we're not seeing much of that, why is that? Is it literally that it's pretty universal that people with disabilities just tend not to be interested in going to those activities? Or are they sitting at their place and it's a transportation issue? Or maybe it's assistance, that maybe they're looking at that if they go and leave their place of residence and go to that activity, and then everything that they have set up there, is it accessible? Are all the volunteers, facilitating inclusion to involve a community member with a disability? And when we're so used to that, that's not the case. To me, that is the real backbone to why we're not seeing attendance at many of these things by people with disabilities. And so that becomes the opportunity, is that if we can tool up and create this education awareness that I received through the last 10 to 15 years from the disability community and before, but it's pretty much the situation of, somebody can teach, but if the student doesn't show up, you have to have a receiver of the message. And so I think that's the point, is that I found that it took me getting further down my journey in life before I really showed up and really looked at it as a change for me to make. Because I think for many, many years, it was like great information, I felt empowered learning about the American Disabilities Act, and I really found it entertaining and sensational what these stories told are all about in these movies and such like that. But I was not personally making an adjustment, and I think that's what I'm recognizing, is that 3 out of 4 people out there are feeling empowered by the messages and the the circumstances and what's around them. But again, it's something that they remove themselves from, and I think I still do that quite a bit. But the idea is I'm empowered by this aha moment, this epiphany, and this realization, and to say that it's so easy to just dismiss it and just move on and make it something that we don't have to concern ourselves with. But then what is that doing for our peers, for our fellow human beings? It's a humanitarian, type of construct. And it's not something where, in disability advocacy, what I caught on to and what's out there in teaching, and even t-shirts and stuff made about it, is like with this ADAPT. This advocacy group called ADAPT has been around since before the American Disabilities Act. And with some of those historical photos where you're seeing, people keep buses from rolling their wheels onto their next thing, their next stop, back in the protest days, ADAPT was very integral into that. Or you get familiar with the story, or you just think of the story if you know it already, about people with physical disabilities crawling up the steps of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And so ADAPT was very much integral into all that, organizing party in all of that taking place. And, as this is done, it is just an expression of fairness. And one of their battle cries is, nothing about us without us. So that's where even I've gotten criticism, because I don't identify with a disability. I don't take on that role, or like Social Security disability, or these programs by Medicare programs and so forth. I don't qualify. I mean, those programs are not designed for me. The legislation isn't about, helping me. And so I'm not in, the ranks of those that get impacted when, these programs are changed or funding is lowered or all that stuff. So like when I'm on here on this show, I've received criticism that I'm not the voice that people need to hear, because people need to hear it right from the people with disabilities. And I appreciate that point. And I think the real interest in that feedback and follow-up is really pointing me to getting people with disabilities on the show. So when I say people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, to get groups and to get people that are people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in here, and get kind of find those people that want to come on here and share their story, being an American with an intellectual or developmental disabilities, or to put right into action that with someone who's deaf or hard of hearing, and keep going to make sure we have an American who's deaf, and to show how something that's very audible, yes, we do have the closed captioning going here on the display for as best as Zoom can do voice recognition, but to get sign language interpretation going and stuff like that.
Kurt, if you want to hear a story, why don't you go ahead and share mine?
Gary, yours. Well, who are you?
Who am I?
Yeah, who are you?
What do you mean, who am I?
well, I was talking through the first part of the show, and then all of a sudden YouTube live group out there, and then we have this recording going up to the disability channel and the PAC channel, and all these people are going to be in the middle of this show, and all of a sudden this lady pops up and says, "Hey, Kurt, share my story." And first thought is like, well, who is this? Whose voice is that? So who are you?
Kurt, you know who this is, Patty Ernest.
Yeah, I know. So everybody, this is our friend Patty here, and she has really gone through the ringer here. It's a story that the ripeness of it all goes right back to 4 months ago. So we're talking in the midst of June. We have our friend here who, let's see here. So there's a restraining order put in place. And so the police come over with a critical response team to make sure that there's compliance with this restraining order. So there's an instructional period through a visit to where Patty lives and going through all that. And then there's a second component to this where this happens again, but even now to a further extent with, Patty finds herself in a moment where she lives that she just needs to blow off a little steam, let off a little steam. And, through the intensity of that, what unfolds is that her housemate, looks onto it and gets compelled to look at this experience of Patty letting off some steam like she needs the authorities, like she needs we need to call in the professionals here and, just kind of, have this handled, that to have this moment handled, all of a sudden a whole cascading effect takes place. So there you have it again. The call goes up by the housemaid, and the response is with law enforcement, critical response team. And, what ends up happening is this time Patty is taken away, and I think that there's a play where my wife Sue is actually a part of it. There's a part of this play where they have characters coming in. I've come to take you away. Haha. I've come to take you away.
The funny farm.
What is that?
The funny farm.
The funny farm?
It's called the funny farm, yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of, where this takes us. And so as we track on this, let's keep in mind that, Patty just needed to vent and let off some steam, and then she was fine. But now the roommate has, or I should say housemate, so the housemaid has a need and calls the authorities and directs it all to Patty. And so Patty's got to deal with this, that now they're directing her to the direction of psychiatrists. And as they're running through procedures, they're reaching for state law where Patty is deemed as not able to make her own decisions. And so I've been an EMT for 10 years. So 10 years experience in pre-hospital care. So I had to learn about, informed consent or implied consent. Because basically when somebody's unconscious and you have to do CPR, they say, well, that's implied consent, because it's pretty universal that unless somebody's got a do not resuscitate order, that your good Samaritan side of it would say, we want to save this person. And, that's all implied consent. And then informed consent is your general practice to say, hi, Patty, my name is Kurt. I'll be your EMT. How can I help you? What seems to be the problem? And then we have a conversation, and we work to make sure that our patient understands what we're doing. So what we need to be aware of is that there are laws in place where if applied correctly, it's great. But when they're applied incorrectly, it's horrific. Because basically what happens when you basically have negligence, and you basically, misapply law and what it's designed for, you put somebody into a place where they start to live a life that they don't know what just happened with their life. They're basically living the life of somebody else because they're judged. And then now they're dealing with stigma because they're going through all this stuff of, having stuff happen to them that ought not be. And that's what happened to Patty. And so she's being, transported around to different facilities, different appointments, and dealing with all this staff that they're getting the write-up. And the write-up says Patty can't make her own decisions. So they're just doing stuff to Patty, and Patty's going through all this stuff, going through the motions. And when you come down to it, it's not informed consent. So not informed, ill-informed, and illegitimate care, quite frankly. And, so you have people paid big bucks for using ginormous resources for an individual like Patty to do something that she doesn't need. So how ridiculous is that? Hey, taxpayers of America and taxpayers, wherever you are.
Yes.
Think about what is going on with our governance, with our government, with our municipalities, with our counties, with our states, and all these programs, that something so ridiculous can take place, because now you're getting judges involved. Now you're getting the judicial system involved. So you got law enforcement, you got the judicial system, you got the mental health system, you got clinics, you got hospitals, and Patty's going through all these motions, and all these people are getting involved. You know what, folks? These folks and a person with a restraining order, and then more so a housemate, can start something where Emily and I got into it to really find out what we're being told and really what's behind it firsthand. Patty basically gave us a tour of recanting everything that's happened since this impasse in June came forward, and it's just like mind-boggling. Like, are you kidding me? And all you can do is have the laughter, to laugh at this, because it's a complete joke. It's a complete insult to injury, and just stupid after stupid. Because we go through this whole tour, and people come to meet me, being introduced, and they get to know Emily for being a virtual assistant, and it's just like, who cares? So what we learn people care about is their paycheck. What we learn people care about is that when there's something that's not working, it's not their job to fix the process. So they say, it's not my job. And you know what? They say it's not their job, and they expect Patty to go away. And you know what? They keep getting paid. So people keep getting paid to do stuff that's not needed. And Patty's saying, hey, you're doing your thing to me, and I don't need it. But nobody cares. You know why? Because they get paid. It's greed. I get to go home at night and enjoy my life. I don't care that Patty is enslaved to the system. It's martial law, folks. We're just ridiculous. It's a sad day in America when judges don't have common sense. Because I learned in business law that it's the reasonable person test. So when you look at this, what I was taught in school is that when you look at what happened to Patty, and the judicial system is involved in the intent of original common law and the general basis of our legal system, is to have everything happen to create this idea of that life can happen within what a reasonable person would expect. So that's what you have to think about is, how do you define reasonable person? What do you think is, for the people in authority, what are they thinking a reasonable person is? But I'll tell you one thing, I'm 50 years old, and in my 50 years of life, I don't think the lion's share of them are reasonable people. We talked about this. There's about 3 people of the 100. There's like 3% of the whole mob of this people are reasonable people. So now Patty's got to figure out how to make the most of that. She's got 3 allies within this whole roster. And those 3 people are not going to be interested to go up against the other 90 plus people. That's not their concern. They just want to help Patty, fortunately. But then you're going to have another doofus getting into the mix of this. And then things are going to propagate. So we have with the Office of Administrative Hearings. We have an administrative law judge who's going to be taking a look at this unless things get rescheduled, whatever. I don't know if there's an update, but the point is that we're going to be following this closely because, you know, as this thing corrects itself, we're going to celebrate with Patty as things correct itself. Patty's sitting here today like, whoa, this should have happened yesterday. Like today's October 15th. It's like she would have loved it if yesterday, Friday, October 14th, that this whole thing was over. Right, Patty?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what this is about is, you know, what is a person supposed to do when they're caught into the lurches of somebody else's life? It's like a fictitious person. It's kind of like being in the Twilight Zone. Does that sound about right, Patty? Twilight Zone?
It does, yep.
So imagine you're in real life, like you're pinching yourself and you're like, am I dreaming this? And like people even like subject you to the idea, you know, like you're severely mentally ill. That's why it seems weird. Like your brain isn't all there. So that's why it seems a little strange. You know, but it's like, no, you better have your head examined. We have 90 plus people who we would propose they need their head examined. And they're like looking at Patty like she needs her head examined. And then to add insult to injury and to be to the point of a grievous act and to do bodily harm. So this is it, folks. You know, I'll speak for myself here, whatever we got to do to get this message out. This is where it's a travesty. This is where I take it very seriously that I pony up here. You know, I come to the table and I say, my fellow Americans, we need to unite around this. This is serious shit here. I mean, this is worth cussing over because this is horrible. When we have the pharmaceutical industry, pharmaceutical companies, they'll go on about research and all this stuff. Wham. If you've got a problem with your business model, go away. Get your pharmaceuticals out of here then if you can't make it work. Bye-bye. I mean, what other industry gets this type of attention that if they're having a challenge doing the thing they want to do, that all of a sudden there's all this governmental support, you know, it's corporate charity, you know, and it's beyond that. It's institutionalized to the point of ridiculous, and other countries look on to us, folks, and they laugh. Canada's laughing. Mexico's laughing. South America's laughing at the United States of America. Europe is laughing. Asia is laughing. Australia is laughing. We're the laughing stock of the planet, folks, here in the USA, because we're all about our pharmaceutical drugs. We have an issue with opioids. We have our opioid crisis, and doctors are overprescribing. Why? Again, why? Let's get down. They always say, follow the money train. It is so true. If you look at what that doctor's got to do to be able to, within a short set of minutes, say, hi, Patty, what's going on with you? You know, what do I need to do? Blah, blah. And people are looking for that instant gratification. What's a way to instantly gratify them? Give them a drug. Opioid. Whoop. There you go. You know? Oh, the housemaid is like, oh my gosh. She's like flying up, you know, like this behavior. Like, oh my gosh. What am I supposed to do? This behavior is in my house. Oh, you need help with that, sir? Oh, we'll put your housemate on drugs. We'll write out that prescription. How about that? You know what? And we have to look at the laws, because fortunately the law has an opportunity that a judge can say, you know, you need the medication. And in many cases, for the reason the law is written, the professionals need that law. But now we got to check in on ethics. Because if we have those laws out there and we have these unethical psychiatrists, which we're dealing with a few of them, this becomes an issue when they reach that power of the pen. Oh, I'm so great. Look at that. I get paid 6 figures in income. I got my $250,000 paycheck a year and all this stuff. Ooh, the drug companies love me, you know? And I get to go home to my pool and I get to take trips with my family. I get to play golf. I just love all this. All I have to do is put drugs in Patty. I say that's horse crap. Folks. When you do that to me, you're committing a crime. That's criminal. That's criminal act to say I'm going to pump synthetic drugs in Patty because I see a complaint here to make my problem go away. She goes on those drugs. I show the world that I tried to do something. Well, and you know what? It's court ordered. So the psychiatrists are creating this loop that they give her the label that's not appropriate, wrong diagnosis, severely mentally ill. So now you got a judge who's like, okay, I got to deal with this lady who's severely mentally ill. We have a complaint by a citizen. The citizen is saying, ooh, there's a risk here. And it's like, really? Did they really look into this? Did they take a reasonable chance? Hell no. No way. Not even close. Because if you really look at it, you're disserving Patty to serve the housemate and whatever else is perceived, because now we're in the public setting. We're in a courtroom. We're in a hearing. Okay, what's the judge going to do? What are the peers of the judge going to respect? You know, with that case, like, oh my gosh, did you see what she did? Oh, everything gets all in uproar. You know, and really, it's the way it's written up. So this becomes an educational training issue. Because now we have a critical response team that is using their authority because Patty was trying to mess with their heads. Patty is full of her wits, better than the critical response team. The critical response team is not educated enough to know that, you know what, that lady was just messing. She was just joking around. You know, yeah, it's a serious topic. Like, hey, have you ever thought of killing yourself? Well, hasn't everybody? You know, it's like, you know what? I'm sick of the fact that you're here. I don't need you. I'm messing with you because you need to go away and leave me alone. No, they're so prideful in their job that they're writing it up. Oh, this lady has suicidal tendencies. Now, that's not to say that we don't need to take that seriously. I was an EMT. If I had somebody say that to me like Patty, I would have to call in people who deal with suicide too. I'd have to say, hey, this lady just told me that, doesn't everybody, like, she's joking about suicide. I mean, what do you guys need me to do? Like, what's the suicide protocol? Yeah, invoke the suicide protocol. Do whatever you got to do. But don't freaking label her as severely mentally ill, send her to a psychiatrist, and go through all this process when that's not a reasonable solution.
Kurt, I was so fed up with them being there twice. These teams were there twice. That of course I was making light of it. I wasn't taking any of this seriously because what the fuck were they doing in that house to begin with?
That's right. That's right. So that's what we're talking about, folks. This gets you primal. This gets you primal. Any person who has a threat brought upon them, and you talk about the audacity of authority and to put the system against the person, that Patty's in a position to have to fight City Hall now. I mean, it's not literally City Hall, but it's that idea of going up.
Might as well have been. Kurt, it might as well have been.
Yeah, you're right, because where did the authorities come? The authorities came from Phoenix, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, this is at every level. Whether you call it city, whether you call it county, whether you call it state, whether you call it nationally, you know, we called at all levels. We sent emails at all levels. We called in the dogs. We gave 100 people a chance, and 3 people took the chance.
And they were doctors. And that was it, my doctor. It was my doctor who took the chance. Yeah.
Yeah. So now, but what it is that the doctor has balls to not be in temptation of what everybody else had the temptation for. you know, you can just kind of follow this process, you know, kind of make Patty do all this stuff, you know, kind of fuel this thing like this will be with Patty for a year or beyond a year, and just make it Patty's deal.
Heaven forbid this should be going on for a year.
Yeah,
Heaven
I mean,
This should be going on for a year.
yeah, there's no respect for, yeah, there's no respect for time in people's lives. I mean, to me, 4 months is enough to figure this out. And for gosh sakes, give Patty her life back.
A day was more than enough. A day was more than enough.
You're right. You're right. None of this should have ever happened from day one. None of this should have happened. For sure. From day one, none of this should have happened. And so everybody along the way had to witness Patty, had a chance to witness Patty like we're witnessing her here today. And it's like, you know, there might be a lot to talk about, a lot of like maybe what life coaches might dive in and say, you know, you could say this, we could say that, just come up with stuff to come up with stuff. But again, if we're looking at the reasonable person test, it's like these folks are trying to throw Patty into the basin of unreasonable. And that's not what's going on here. It's not severely mentally ill, perpetuating an unreasonable behavior, and like all of these security, safety measures. I mean, yeah, go ahead and do that, but don't end the process with Patty doesn't get her life back. You know, because it interrupts business, it interrupts service. And you know what? It's all in the auspices of mental health, yet it's 90 plus people driving a problem for Patty, create a problem she never asked for, deserved, or any of that stuff. And it challenges Patty to stay in decent mental health as she's dealing with them that came into her life June and forward. Whereas in May, it's like if somebody could just wave a wand and let Patty go back to Maine, you know, it would be like Pleasantville. It'd be like it, you know, there'd be a lot of things Patty would say, oh, I wish this was going better, you know, but she was working on all this stuff that, you know, could go better, you know, in May. But then all of a sudden the shackles came on in June and July. And then you have August and September just gobbling up like, how do I unravel this tangled web that they have woven? And you have 90 plus people who won't take ownership to it. It is absolutely ridiculous. Everybody's pointing the finger the other way. You know, go over to NAMI, go over to this mental health, go to this board, go to, you know, the Health and Human Services, go to over here, go to over there. You know, there's like 100 different ideas. It's like, you know, too many cooks in the kitchen, you know, spoil the broth type of thing. You know, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. You know, these people need a conference. They need a workshop to say, what are y'all going to do to make sure the Patty effect never happens again to anybody else on earth? You know, and not to say that they can control what happens other places, but in their corner of the world, in their office, in their clinic, you know, when they answer the phone, you know, we've had amazing experiences of like, oh, I got to end this call right now. Like, the call was not going the way they wanted to, so they get to just hang up and collect their paycheck anyway. Like, it doesn't matter if they hang up, they still get their paycheck. You know, but then they just leave Patty sitting there like she's a slave to what they're letting happen. So what do you think, Patty? Was that a pretty good summation of your story?
It is astonishing. It is beyond belief that any of this has happened. And to say that it happened for a day, much less a year or more, is ridiculous.
There you go. So this thing is a can of worms for sure, a tangled web. It's very intricate. It's full of drama. It's full of, you know, possibility. I mean, you know, it's, you know, waiting, you know, the next week and a half, whatever. There's possibilities maybe around the corner. With these legal things, sometimes schedule just gets changed and they're like bumping things down the road. You never know. But we here at the World Ability Podcast Network, we're going to be updating you. We're going to have updates here. We have our Ability MK Now show, this World Ability show, and we'll be staying on this to give you updates. Because it's really taking a look and a calling out, and something that really we invite you out there to join this advocacy. If what we said today resonates with you, I mean, we heard other stories of other parents dealing with it's happening to their kid, a man dealing with their brother, a lady dealing with it's happened to her mother. I mean, we heard a few different stories that is not exactly the story that Patty brings forward, but it's a thing where, again, people are feeling over medicated. They feel they're forced in a situation. People in their authority in the medical system, they think they can just do this stuff to us. And you know what? I shared with Patty that I have a few medical organizations, health organizations, local to me from where I'm sitting right now. There's a few of these organizations out here who have administratively given me a ban because I protect myself in this way. And I make sure that if they think they're doing something with me, that I understand and that I'm in agreement. And if I'm not getting what they're delivering, I'm going to ask and I'm going to be like, hey, can you help me figure this out? I don't get what you're doing to me right now. And then people look at you like, why don't you just do what you're told? And I'm like, really? No, this is my body. Like what's happening to Patty, that if, they're sitting there forcing pharmaceuticals to be like, that's going to be pumping through, that pumps through her blood system, causes damage to her, the side effects and everything there, it's real stuff. So if you have anything you want to share, definitely feel free to give me a call or text it to me, 262-372-1SKI, 262-372-1754. And for either show, whether Ability MK Now on Wednesdays at 7:30 Central or our 2:00 Central show, your World Ability show, you can email me through abilitymknow@gmail.com. Check out our social media. Go ahead and put comments right on this YouTube video or wherever you see it out there with the Disability Channel or with World Ability Podcast Network, with the PAC channel, Transforming Media Network. Go ahead and interact, share it out and around. And I also want to give a shout out to our friends here at the Happy Neighborhood Project, where Patty and I met. Patty and I met through HMP. I am a proud member of the Happy Neighborhood Project. I am a mentor that I help captains, lead the way with co-hosts or to captains serve the co-host team of 1 to 4 people, ideally 4, but we have some co-host teams that are short. So if anybody out there wants to ask, what's that co-host opportunity all about, let me know. And we just had our Global Happiness Summit, last Friday. And so we still have a lot of energy and reverberation going out and around about how great that was, what we did there on hopin.com. And we're already looking forward to International Day of Happiness, Friday, March 17th, St. Patty's Day. Wait a minute, St. Patty's Day. And we have Patty here. So this is going to be interesting how we finish this year, go into next year. We continue to spread happiness around the world. And with HMP staking the claim of being the happiest place on earth for business people, we're going to go out there and keep doing our business here, which is to help the world be a more inclusive, accommodating, and favorable under the terms of people with disabilities. So with that, we're at the end of our show. My name is Kurt Roskoff, and we hope you'll join us Wednesday with Wednesday with Ability MK Now, and then again next Saturday, the World of Ability, and then enjoy it. We know you're getting this on various days of the week with all our syndication and restreaming. So whenever you're getting this, we hope it's finding you well. With that, we're saying goodbye until next time. So Emily, if you can do us the favor and